Tonight on Greater Boston, U.S. Attorney Rachael Rollins joins me on white supremacy in our streets and in government. Plus, whether someone under 21 should ever be sentenced to life without the possibility of parole, and more. And later, sports betting is about to become legal in Massachusetts, and while some are expecting a big payoff for the state, others have big concerns about the possible risks involved. Red Sox Executive VP David Friedman and Marlene Warner, Executive Director of the Massachusetts Council on Gaming and Health, join me. When Rachael Rollins was sworn in as U.S. Attorney for Massachusetts, she laid out her priorities for the office, including equity, systemic criminal justice reform, and combating hate. And unfortunately, she's had a lot to work on in all those areas. From the civil rights investigation she's launched into racist incidents within the Everett city government to the multiple extremist groups that have been holding demonstrations in the region, like the white supremacist group NSC 131, which targeted a drag queen story hour children's reading event in JP a little over a week ago. Another white supremacist group, the Patriot Front, marching through Boston. The NSC 131 Keep Boston Irish presence at the St. Patrick's Day Parade in March, and the neo-Nazi protest at Brigham and Women's Hospital in February. In response, Rollins has said she wants law enforcement to be proactive rather than reactive, and appears to have taken a step in that direction today with the launch of an End Hate hotline. U.S. Attorney Rachael Rollins joins me now. U.S. Attorney, it's good to see you. Thanks so much for being here.
Of course.
I assume this hotline is exactly the kind of thing you were talking about when you used the word proactive. How does it work?
What happens, Jim, is that we start saying out loud 183 End Hate Now, and we start making sure that that is something I'm saying a lot when I'm speaking in the community or with members of the media, and then people have to call. And we will be notified. I personally will get a notification when somebody leaves a voicemail message, and we're going to field that information out to the appropriate entities as we see fit.
By the way, it's on the screen now. We'll put it up at the end of the segment as well. What else? You've created some sort of unit or expanded a unit, from what I understand, that it's going to address these issues as well. What's the deal with that?
Well, we've always had exceptional assistant United States attorneys working on hate crimes, which include, or civil rights violations, which include hate crimes and human trafficking issues, excessive force allegations against law enforcement. But they've done that in addition to the work they've done for other units. What we've done, Jim, is we've just made sure that this really important work gets a unit of its own. Nobody is splitting their time between narcotics and money laundering and prosecuting hate crimes, or economic crimes and prosecuting hate crimes, or other units we have. So we are a dedicated unit with exceptional AUSAs, exceptional staff that are going to be working exclusively on these types of cases.
I want to play some sound from you to you. This is you speaking after this law enforcement listening session. This is after the Patriot Front march that I just mentioned. Here it is.
We had a lot of pointed questions, and we should, as to if this were a Black Lives Matter protest, would the response have been different than this white supremacist group?
You asked that question a month ago. Do you have an answer yet?
I believe that Mayor Wu has indicated herself that she does not believe the response was adequate to BPD. And listen, Jim, I am often the only woman in the room when I'm meeting with leaders in law enforcement, and oftentimes also, sadly, the only person of color in the room. And I will ask these hard questions. Look, I think that, what we need is a more proactive response, and I think Mayor Wu has indicated that that's going to happen in the future moving forward.
Yeah, but your response, U.S. Attorney, was that Mayor Wu has concluded that it wasn't adequate. Not being adequate is not the same as saying it would have been handled differently if they had been black demonstrators rather than white demonstrators. That was the question you broached. Would it have been handled differently?
Well, I think law enforcement, when asked, said no, it would not have been. They were concerned about looking as if they were escorting this group through the city. And we are talking, of course, about the incident, particularly on the weekend of July 4th. But that goes to a deeper issue, right? We need law enforcement that reflects the communities that it that it protects and serves. And what we are doing, and I'm a member of law enforcement, Jim, we're making sure that we have a better response there. So I'm not looking backwards and casting blame, but what I am doing is making sure that moving forward, we're going to have a different response.
I want to go from racism in the streets to racism in City Hall. You announced you're doing an investigation into possible civil rights violations in Everett. And for those who didn't follow this painful story, a city councilor used the N-word. He resigned. A city staff person in a conversation with him talked about bringing one of your dark friends to an event. What's the status of that investigation?
So we have two investigations, Jim, actually into cities since I've become the U.S. attorney. We have the Everett investigation where we simply wrote a letter and saying we are inquiring. We want information. I need to be clear. The mayor of Everett and his team have responded immediately and said they will assist. So we are not getting resistance from the city of Everett. And we're in the process of looking through that information. I can tell you why I sent that letter is because of the information you mentioned and the fact that, for example, Everett is a majority minority city, but unfortunately has, I think, approximately 2% of its city employees make up people of color, particularly Black and Latinx individuals. And those numbers don't automatically state that there is discrimination, but they do raise a question as to whether or not these decisions made by the city are helpful to all of the residents of Everett or are potentially discriminatory. So we have made no determination. We've simply said we're looking. And the other inquiry, Jim, is into Quincy.
We're going to get to the Quincy thing in a minute, which is about another issue, if we can. You said that the mayor is cooperating. I have to say, as a layperson, early on, I would say he was doing the opposite. He was defending his cousin, the city councilor, who was using the N-word until he wasn't defending him. And it seems to me that in a comment he made to our colleague here, Liz Niesloss, and a couple of other reporters on March 15th, he's essentially admitting that it doesn't stop with that former employee of his and the councilor. Here's Mayor DeMaria.
I've seen some of this behavior from some other elected officials, and we are thoroughly investigating all people's social media pages. I want people to understand that we're taking this very serious, that we don't condone this type of behavior.
Have you yet found, to quote him, some of this behavior from other elected officials in Everett?
Well, what I can say is we're looking into, so my letter was sent after the individual stepped down, you know, with outrage or reaction, quite frankly, from the people of Everett. What we are doing is looking at who the mayor has in his direct control, specifically with respect to hiring decisions, appointments that he's making. His cousin, who was on the city council as well, Jim, did say I believe over social media that other people also have espoused these type of beliefs or ideologies, or use these words. So we are looking into all of that, yes.
You know, I want to ask you the same question I asked you, I think it was last month or the month before. I am using your word outraged by the fact that while every politician who can get to a microphone is willing to call out white supremacists on the street, unless I missed it, with the exception of the Attorney General when we asked her on the radio saying that that counselor should resign immediately, and you beginning an investigation, could you list for me all the other public officials who say they're appalled that counselors are using the N-word, that a mayor, at least up front, is condoning it? Is anybody else talking about this?
I have not seen it. I do want to commend our Attorney General for doing so. I think we also need to commend the media for writing about it, not just local media in Everett, but also the Boston Globe and other publications. And that, quite frankly, Jim, is how that came to my attention. So the media's work is important in letting communities, all communities, know what it is that's happening there. So
wouldn't you like to hear a few more elected officials sounding off about this thing?
I'd like to hear a few more people, whether elected or not, taking notice of the fact that, you know, when individuals that are leaders in community have these really repugnant beliefs, it's a problem.
Okay, so you mentioned the several other civil rights investigation you're doing in Quincy. This is around whether or not there's discrimination against people with addiction because of their opposition to the reconstruction of Long Island Bridge, but since you started that investigation, I hope I have the timing right, the state's highest court has basically said the objection of the Quincy Conservation Commission, if I got it right, is overdone or is subservient to the determination by the state that it can go ahead. Does that moot out your investigation? Because essentially, and I spoke to Mayor Wu about this on the radio too, while there's still permitting to go, that obstacle, at least as of the moment, from Quincy doesn't exist anymore. Am I right about that?
You are right. That obstacle does not exist, but there were multiple things that the city of Quincy did, and our inquiry continues. I think also, Jim, after our highest court in our Commonwealth, the SJC, unanimously found against the city of Quincy, a Superior Court judge also had a ruling about a week later. So there have been some findings that have not supported what Quincy has done. But we continue looking to see whether their decisions overall, and they did many things, not just with respect to permitting and allegations of environmental issues, their traffic arguments that they made, we are very interested in, because I remind you again, if any of you have been to Marina Bay, I wonder whether there were traffic concerns when they were building Marina Bay for the beautiful people. And now essentially, when we think about who might be using the Long Island Bridge, it is not necessarily maybe the same cohort that will be going to Marina Bay in their yachts or for drinks after work or on weekends.
Excellent comparison. You know, since you mentioned the state's highest court, I want to bring up one other thing with you. State's highest court basically deputized this Superior Court judge, Robert Ullman, to look into the neuroscience around young people under 21 committing certain crimes. And before he looked into it, if you're under 18, it was unconstitutional, automatically sentence you to life without parole. This Judge Ullman is recommending, based upon some actual cases and I guess his research into neuroscience, that the SJC affirm his determination that it should be unconstitutional to automatically sentence someone 21 or younger to life without parole. That was an issue that you were arguing when you were the DA of Suffolk County. Could you, I mean, obviously you support this thing. Give us a minute on why this makes sense for people who we're talking about have committed the most serious of crimes, murder.
Yeah, for sure. So there are two things, Jim, that I signed myself, my hand, or electronically as the district attorney, the elected DA of Suffolk County. The Sean Ellis pleading and this pleading with respect to Robinson, Mattis, and Watt. Those are two cases. Mattis and Watt are co-defendants, and Robinson is a different individual. And essentially what we are doing is the United States Supreme Court has found in the opinion of Miller that not that juvenile or individuals under 18 being sentenced to death is unconstitutional, but that there has to be a separate hearing before making that determination. Our state Supreme Judicial Court went a step further in Dianchenko and said, no. Anyone under 18 cannot get life without the possibility of parole. They have to have the possibility of parole. When I wrote our pleading in favor of moving that age forward, and four of my colleagues tried to jump into that case, and I said, no, we can handle it, thank you very much. I basically said, look, 18 to 20-year-olds are far more similar to 16 and 17-year-olds than they are to 21 and 22. And what Judge Ullman did was agree with me and say, we believe there should be a separate Miller hearing in first-degree murder cases where a judge has to determine whether they get life without or life with the possibility of parole.
So it's not automatic. It would not be automatic.
Not automatic.
But
an additional hearing.
I only have a minute or so left. I'm embarrassed to say I don't know the answer to this question, but I'm sure you do. The law on the federal level, which you deal with, doesn't have this sort of recognition of 18 to 21-year-olds, does it? Does it?
No.
So what happens when you're in a situation, you're about to have your desire realized by the SJC in terms of state matters, where under 21, this procedural addition, extra attention given to people 21 and under who, and before life without parole is a sentence, that doesn't apply on the federal level. So you could be involved in a case where a 19-year-old is sentenced to life without parole automatically, and you have to advance that cause because you work for the Department of Justice in federal cases. Is that not troubling for you?
Well, it is, there are different obligations as the U.S. attorney than there are as the district attorney of Suffolk County. And I willingly took this job. So what we do is we do look, age can be a mitigating factor. And essentially, we always look at mitigating and aggregating factors or aggravating factors, I'm sorry, whenever we make our determinations. But you're right, Jim, it's a different standard on the federal side. And most often the murders are being handled by the district attorneys, the 11 district attorneys in our Commonwealth, and they do a very good job.
But there are certain murders that are treated federally.
For sure, like the Sarnaev case, the MS-13 trials,
so
Jassy Carrera.
I know you're sick of this question because I and many others asked you when you were up for the job, and now you have the job. In 15 seconds, that's hard, is it not? For you, I understand that's hard. The different rule. It's hard, right?
It's hard, but you know what, Jim? I'm proud of the work we did in the DA's office. A lot of people are going to be impacted by the decision that I made in the brief that I wrote, and we're going to bring it up to the Supremes to make a decision. Our Supremes to make a decision, and I feel really tied to Judge Oman because he decided the Lucian case, the Ellis case, and now this case as well.
Rachael Rollins, it's always good to see you. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
You be well, Jim.
You too. Again, the hotline is 1-83-END-HATE. That's H8 now. For more information, visit justice.gov/USAO-MA. More than 4 years after the Supreme Court authorized commercial sports betting, during which time 2/3 of the state signed on, Massachusetts lawmakers have reached a deal to legalize it in this state, both virtually and in person. And while the exact when and where is still to be determined, in-person betting at least could very well be here in Massachusetts by the Super Bowl. And while legalized betting has plenty of supporters who view this change as long overdue, including Governor Charlie Baker, some have concerns about possible risks. I'm joined by David Friedman, Executive Vice President of Legal and Government Affairs and Chief Compliance Officer for the Boston Red Sox. Marlene Warner is the Executive Director of the Massachusetts Council on Gaming and Health. Welcome to you both. Good to see you both.
Thank you.
Great to see you, Jim.
And you as well, David. David, starting with you, 10 years ago, the Commissioner of Baseball, Bud Selig, testified in front of some body in New Jersey that was contemplating legalizing sports betting there. He said he was appalled and that gambling is evil, creates doubt, and destroys your sport. 10 years later, not just the Red Sox, every pro sports team in town is a supporter of this legislation. What happened? DraftKings? I mean, what happened?
It's a good question, Jim, and it really is quite a turnaround during history. In a nutshell, I think once NBA Commissioner Adam Silver came publicly to the conclusion that there's already a lot of illegal sports betting happening in town today, all the leagues and teams reflected on that and thought, at the end of the day, given how much illegal activity is happening, it makes sense to try to have a legal market that's regulated, that protects consumers better and also protects the integrity of the game. And it's kind of as simple as that.
But it's a growth strategy too, obviously. There's nothing wrong with that. It is, right?
The leagues and teams think that there's some fan engagement that could be a benefit to having sports betting legalized. And so, we think that this is a place where there's some opportunity. And now, after the past 4 years when different states have legalized sports betting, we're getting to see how that plays out.
So, Marlene, my understanding is your organization isn't pro or con the legislation. You just raise concerns about the possible risks about gambling and addiction. So what are those concerns? And there are a lot of safeguards built into this legislation. Did they satisfactorily address your concerns?
They did an excellent job, not unlike the 2011 Expanded Gaming Act. We are really leaders here in Massachusetts among the United States and certainly in even some other jurisdictions outside the United States. I'd say that they did a really nice job. There are a few areas where we'd like to see some additional improvements, but But listen, the Mass Gaming Commission will put this into regulation. They've done a nice job. They can be trusted.
Well, yeah, no credit cards, which I think is huge. You can only spend the money essentially.
Credit extension.
What's that again?
And no credit extension.
That's great. I didn't know that. You got to be at least 21. There's regulations around ads. There's a 9% of the revenue goes into a public health fund to address your kind of concerns. But you said they could have done more, like what?
So, one of the things you just talked about was advertising. One of the things we know is that a lot of the companies that will vie for a license here have just received a license in Ontario and are meeting much more stringent guidelines around advertising. One of the things we'd like to see is whistle-to-whistle ban on advertising so that anyone who is watching is not being bombarded with gambling advertisements and really paying attention. There is some language in there in terms of the folks that are going to be receiving those ads, but making sure, for example, it says no ads going to people on the self-exclusion list. We'd like to make sure that it's for anyone who's at high risk and not just on the self-exclusion list.
David, my understanding, please correct me if I'm wrong, you're much more involved in this than I am, starts with casinos, the 3 casinos, then moves online. And there's a study in place where kiosks, even at places like Fenway, could ultimately happen. Is that an accurate retelling of what this legislation does?
That's right. Although the study doesn't automatically do anything, the legislature would still have to come back and affirmatively allow for additional in-person sites like kiosks.
So just to be clear, I want to repeat what you said back to you. Even if this study or this commission or whatever the hell it is decides kiosks were appropriate and, let's say, obviously relevant to your life, appropriate at Fenway, they'd need to pass additional legislation to make that happen?
That's right. The legislation that the legislature just passed, that the governor still needs to sign for it to be law, has a licensing process, and there are specific licenses that are allowed, but there's no license allowed under this legislation for kiosks anywhere. They'll be at the casinos, not kiosks, but in-person betting. So the legislature would have to come back and add other places like kiosks or pro sports venues.
Would you like kiosks at Fenway?
We had a lot of discussion with legislators about the idea of retail in-person sports betting near venues. We think that it's an attractive idea, but we're very pleased with the legislation that passed. And so I think we're happy to see how it goes once it's launched and what the market looks like. And then we'll talk to people as they study the issue.
David, in the 33 states that have done this so far, I think it's 33 in DC, but roughly that number, I would have assumed that the largest percentage of gambling where it's permitted would be online. Am I wrong about that or no?
That is absolutely correct from all the data we've seen, yes.
So, Marlene, you mentioned the Gaming Commission. Steve Crosby used to chair it, used to sit across from me here and go out of his way to talk about all the precautions that were built in about addiction. When I went to Plainville or Plainview or whatever it is for the first time, the second you walk in the door, there's a little table and it says to you, has literature and a phone number about problem gambling, whatever you want to call it. Has the Gaming Commission and has the state, the legislature, our governors, have they responsibly dealt with the issues that you work on, or has it been like pulling teeth?
100% they've been responsible and responsive. Our organization runs that center you were talking about.
Oh, it does? Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know that.
Casino. That's okay. In Plainville, Mass. By Penn National. And there's also ones on site at Encore Boston Harbor and at Springfield, MGM Springfield. And Steve Crosby actually sits on my board of directors.
Oh, really?
And so what I'll tell you is that, yes, they have. Listen, we don't always see eye to eye, but I think what's been fantastic is there's always a dialogue, and whether that's the legislature, whether that's the Gaming Commission, whether that's the governor, there's been a dialogue, and everyone wants to be on the right side of public health in this discussion.
David, I should have been candid with you at the beginning of this. I'm in a minority in this state, and I know I am. I don't like state-sponsored gambling in general. It's not some puritanical position. There was a study years ago, you may have been in the legislature at this point, that was done by Tom Birmingham's committee, who went on to be the Senate president, showing that the lottery was like Robin Hood in reverse. Essentially, not only did we spend more money on the lottery per capita than any state in the country by far, not even a close second, but that poor people spent much more money on it, and money ended up being transferred through local aid to richer communities. You work for a team, and it's odd to say this, and an owner, John Henry, that have a social conscience. In any part of this process, were you worried about the implications for low and moderate income people of expanding gambling yet again in Massachusetts?
You know, Jim, it's a great question. It's a fair one. And thank you for the compliment in our team. We do try to do socially conscientious work.
I think you do, yeah.
And I think, you know, my answer before really answers your question. There is so much illegal sports betting happening already that kind of wealth transfer is already going on, except that it's on illegal offshore apps that can't be regulated in the first place. And I'll give you a quick anecdote. As you know, many years ago, I had the honor and privilege of clerking at the U.S. Supreme Court. I was much younger. Chief Justice Rehnquist, I can say this now that a long time has gone by, ran an illegal sports betting pool out of his office for the NCAA basketball tournament. So, you know, it's like Casablanca. There's betting happening here. I can't believe it. And once you focus on the massive amount of legal betting, it kind of made sense to support legalization.
You know, David, one more thing for you, and I'm embarrassed I didn't think of this until you were talking about it a minute ago. I am a huge baseball fan from when I was a kid, and I have the same problem that almost every fan has. There's so much time in between pitches. You could go argue a case before the Supreme Court. My understanding is this legislation, correct me if I'm wrong, allows for in-game betting. Am I not right about that?
That's correct for pro sports, yes.
So is baseball, I don't mean this facetiously, is baseball not tailor-made for in-game betting because of the unending pauses between pitches?
Well, I think you're right that there's a lot of people who are casual sports betting people or people who are, you know, more serious about it who like those in-game proposition bets. I'll emphasize one thing we like about the legislation is it lets the leagues go to the Gaming Commission if there are problematic types of bets to ask those not to be allowed. So I'll give you an example. The first foul in an NBA game, who wants to bet on that? But it's very easy for a player to whisper to some friend, hey, I'm going to commit that first foul. It doesn't change the outcome. So the answer is yes. If someone's excited to bet on who the next home run is going to be by, or, you know, is a particular pitcher going to strike out 6 people tonight, that's a kind of an interesting in-game bet. It keeps you engaged in the game. So we think that's kind of neat.
But the point I think you were trying to make is that you would oppose in-game bets that players could intentionally act on rather than that would not affect the outcome. Is that not where you were going?
Right. That's a consideration that the leagues and the legislature thought a lot about to try to, among other things, promote integrity. Because the last thing any of us want is for someone to doubt that these games are being played fully in a competitive spirit.
Okay, before you go, just so I know who I'm talking to, did you both buy Mega Millions tickets? Yes or no? David? No? No, Marlene?
A friend of mine did, but I
Well, it's the irony of this is I'm against this gambling. I bought 10 and the two of you bought none. So let's leave it there. Marlene and David, I really appreciate your time. Good luck. Be well.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thanks. That's it for tonight. Please be sure to join us next week as our series of statewide primary debates continue with the Democratic candidates for state auditor on Monday, then the Democratic candidates for Secretary of the Commonwealth on Wednesday. We hope you'll join us for those. Thanks for watching. And please don't forget Ukraine.